Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show, we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the Villages to get perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We are a listener-supported podcast. There will be shout-outs for supporters in episodes. In Season 6, we will continue making substantial improvements to the podcast.
This is Mike Roth. Listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project to bring knowledge, inspiration, and things you need to know about the Villages and the people living here. Be sure to hit the follow button to get the newest episode each week. Or you can hit the purple supporter box. Even a small donation of $3 to $10 a month makes a big difference. And you can cancel your subscription at any time. Your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on. I hope everyone enjoys today's show. This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. Here today with Sue Ryan. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sue has had a multifaceted career. She's been a change strategist, a speaker, an author, an executive coach, and she's been a caregiver for a lot of years in her life. Sue, how many years of caregiving experience do you have?
40 years of caregiving experience, Mike.
More experience than you have as an enterprise software sales. She's had the pleasure of being a TEDx speaker and co-authored 5 international bestsellers and an award-winning online course for caregivers. She does a podcast with Nancy Treaster. That's called The Caregivers Journey. Okay. And you have a nonprofit to help deal with dementia.
What we wanted to do is to create the caregiversjourney.org as a nonprofit so that we could be bringing resources to dementia family caregivers. And there are a lot of diagnoses under the umbrella of dementia. We want to bring resources to help dementia family caregivers more easily and also do them at little or no fee.
That's great. And if you've listened to the whole catalog of the 170 podcasts in this series, you'll discover that we did have a author here in the Villages who was a caregiver, wrote a book about caregiving for her dad and her husband. And then recently, about 2 weeks ago, we did a show with Chris Durance, who is the producer-director of the PBS show on caregiving. It's a 2-hour special. It was on June 28th, and it's on pbs.org.
Wonderful.
It was a very interesting conversation with Chris. And through the PBS stations, they've created a long-term set of programs that have been ongoing for the last couple of months and plan to go for the next 3 years on caregiving. And he's going to be doing a series of shows on dementia and other brain-related issues. To the podcast and give you contact info. He was one of the ones where we recorded an hour and wound up with 25 minutes. We have a lot of older people here in the Villages, and the younger people wind up with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. What are the most important things, that maybe the top 3 or 4 things that family members should take into account and do when they get their first indication that this family member is suffering some kind of dementia?
Sure. It's a really good question because the first thing that you want to do is can see in those of us as urinary tract infections and present themselves at memory loss and with other challenges that would be similar to dementia, is to identify if it is and what that really looks like and what it really is, because dementia itself as a diagnosis is an umbrella over a number of different types of Alzheimer's disease. There's temporal, there's with aphasia, of different ways it manifests itself.
People misdiagnosed, like Robin Williams. First is Parkinson's, then Alzheimer's, I guess, and then it turned out on autopsy it was Lewy body disease.
There are different types over the course of he was originally dementia with Lewy bodies, then frontotemporal and forgetful, or you actually have something that you want to look at medically like a type of a dementia. Occasional.
Yeah, I think as people get older, they will get more forgetful. People's brains shrink as they get older on one side. If it is Alzheimer's, they build up plaque in their brain, which diminishes capacity.
Sure. So the first things we want to do is to kind of just, first of all, start observing and then identify if it seems like perhaps it's one kind of anything about it. The sooner knowledge that there's something that's not to determine what it is, you'll have a longer pathway to be taking action in one way or another to rule a type of dementia or to see it and to make the most positive journey.
What were the top 2 or 3 things? That first one would be
The first thing
testing.
that I would do, actually the number one first thing, before test, not a type determine if there's something medically going on or if it is potentially the beginnings of a disease. And then the third one is recognizing that you're a team, recognizing that you have a loved one. They may have a medical diagnosis of a type of dementia. You have a diagnosis as a king together. It's not one or the other. You don't quit supporting the person with the dementia or whatever other diagnosis it is.
Self-care is important. The medical community, I don't think, has stepped up to doing everything they can do. Going back maybe 3 or 4 years, the diagnosis of dementia would be my loved one's having memory problems, and they give him a memory test. They say, come back in a year and we'll see how he does on the memory test then. Whereas today, they have a new FDA-approved blood test that will find amyloid and tau in your blood. And if it's in your blood, it's in your brain.
Yeah.
I just had a friend who thought he was having memory problems and went through the local VA, and then he was sent up to the VA in Gainesville for a whole battery of tests. And they told him he's fine. But he says, Mike, I'm not fine. I'm forgetting things. I'm doing things that maybe I shouldn't be doing. They should have been going after the new blood test to find out what's going on in his blood. Does he have the blood work that says this is dementia?
What is that this isn't relative abilities diminish somewhat. When you're aware of it or your loved one's aware and they're like, yeah, this isn't right, raise it to your level of awareness. And if this is, well, I know we don't think there's anything, we'll test this. So keep pushing on it if you think there is an issue. And all community focuses on is the person with the diagnosis. And that's the person who's caring for them. Just remember that whatever that is that it's you and your loved one, and focus together on the diagnosis to both become as healthy as you possibly can.
Well, and that's important. I had a close friend who was diagnosed with aphasia. He couldn't put words together. He was the most brilliant guy around, really smart. He lived with that for a couple of years. He and his wife split up. He found a new girlfriend from Canada, which to me wasn't a great idea because of the differences in medical system. And then he never divorced his wife. And I said, why didn't you divorce her? You have all the money in the world. It doesn't matter. And he says, no, it's cheaper for me to keep her than divorce. And then 3 years later, he died. And now there's a problem between his kids and this wife, or widow now.
There can be and all kinds of things like that. There's some complexities. Observed in my dad, he didn't call out on his own. Several of us having a harder time remembering words. And in the beginning, you fill it in. You feel like, well, there are things, and people will fill in the words for you. You don't think anything of it. Then it becomes a pattern. And so because you know them.
At first, I didn't see any problem with my friend. And after a year, I noticed there was a material problem. And then the other thing that I noticed is that his level of decision making, which was always spot on, had become really strange. He was doing a lot of strange stuff.
Well, you raise a really
good point.
You can be impaired up to about 5 years before the diagnosis. And there's research on it that is one of the things that can judgment assign.
Right. I've seen that happen to other people too. Probably more than 18 months later, he winds up in a memory care unit. His children put him there. I visited him there, and he was very unhappy and agitated about the way his assets were being controlled by other people. Very sad case. His doctors told me that for someone with the type of dementia that he had, he was doing very well because he was walking around, he was talking, and he was perfectly lucid sometimes, but not others. So the first thing is to recognize medically what's happening. Second thing that family members should do is what?
In the very beginning, you want becoming aware of it, work with the medical community as a second to get some ideas, get some tests done, get some, and then to also recognize that you're a team who is now a caregiver, and you go to the doctor, get these information about the diagnosis and a lot of information that's going to support you with the patient, and the caregiver leaves with nothing. Going to be shifting their life in order to the best kind of support for their loved one. So we want to do the best we can to be providing the care for our loved one, as well as
Let's listen to Dr. Craig Curtis and me talk about why Alzheimer's disease is the most feared disease in America. It's feared disease in America, more than heart attacks.
It's a very fair disease because
But
it
heart
robs
attacks
us.
and strokes kill more people.
That is true. It's the number one killer of men and women in the United States. Alzheimer's disease is also the only one of the top 10 killers of Americans that we currently don't have a way of modifying significantly. But through these prevention studies, we're hoping we can find some more answers. We're also looking at removing this amyloid before someone gets symptoms. We talked about tau and that protein, how it spreads through the brain. We currently have a research trial where we're testing a vaccine to see if we can halt the spread of tau. It's a worldwide study, and we're doing it right here in the villages. And we're really hopeful that things like this in the future can provide us some help. That study might be able to stop the progression of tau if it works.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the village's community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
How does the caregiver make a determination that it's time to bring in outside help into the home?
that's a question that is going to vary by each person, because the things that's going to happen is when you talk about bringing a family member who could come for a couple of hours so that you could go to the grocery store. There's for example, a church who's going to provide respite. There's the level of care where it begins to get more personal. The loved one has become incontinent and could be, or to feed them and have that part of the feed process. And that's something that requires more expertise. Then you're going to start looking at professional care. And that professional care will either come from an individual who's a professional or from an organization who has professional caregivers who could come into the home.
And bringing professional caregivers into the home seems to make a lot of sense for some people. For other people, not so much. But how does a family member make a decision that it's time to put a loved one in a memory care unit?
That's an excellent question. The way that I determined it with care for my husband is I had two goals for him throughout our entire journey. And I've had this with all of my care receivers. I want them to be safe. Take on, my husband would go into what I call a dementia moment. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know what was going on. He did not feel safe. See me as someone who was his life partner, someone who was, they don't recognize you when there's a larger person and a stronger person than I am. If I'm a threat to him, the most loving gentleman in the entire world could have hurt me. And there were me, and he was quite firm when he was at a moment. And I knew that there was a very good chance that he could. From a realistic perspective, I said the wisest choice for his health and safety, put him in an environment where there were professionals around him. First part of it. So I ready to bring professionals into the longer period of time, or a right time for me to do a care community. One of the things that indicated to me that a care community was a wiser choice is he was a very social person. He liked being active in his thoughts throughout that time. I recognized that he needed to be in a more controlled environment. And that meant that I took him in the home and brought more stimulation to him, or for me that it was the right thing for me to do as opposed to keeping him at home. My partner kept her husband at home and brought care into the home because his diagnosis was different. Symptomatically, it manifested itself differently, and they were able to manage him.
That's right. The caregiver, well, caregivers, if there are multiple caregivers living in the home with the person with a dementia problem, is very serious.
It varies by diagnosis, and then B, where they are in their diagnosis. And so you can't say, well, they've been diagnosed for 5 months, this is going to happen. No, not so much. You observe the whole diagnosis journey, our continuous observation, continuously making choices, continuously like, what is there here for me to learn? What is there here for sources of? Or you can ask the questions. Big part of the dementia journey is you don't know the answers to the questions because you don't know the questions to
Until it happened.
You
Right,
don't. And
right.
it's a big impetus for the reason that my business partner and I launched our podcast. We call it Practical Tips and Candid Conversations. We wanted dementia family caregivers to learn faster and more easily than we did about things that are going to go on in your journey. And you don't know when they're going to happen.
I remember when we had to put my mom into a nursing home, getting her to sign a power of attorney, how difficult that was for her. That probably happened because we
Mhm.
waited at least 6 months too late to
Yeah.
wake up and say, "Oh, we got to do something." It was
You
difficult.
definitely to wait. You want it, and as I was saying before, you want the longest pathway possible. There is don't have even have a diagnosis now. You don't have either life insurance or long-term health care. You want to evaluate what diagnosis of dementia. We're all going to be aging and we're all going to be having issues. Really sad cases where they didn't do a financial power of attorney and or they didn't legal power of attorney, the NR. They
Well,
hadn't
that's a
looked at
whole
deed. It doesn't matter whether you're ever going to have a we want to make sure we're doing that. And every one of us should have that, especially when there is a diagnosis and our loved one is no longer competent to sign their legally.
right. And there's a time curve as people go downhill, and it's important to know what kind of a curve your loved one is on. And that's partially determined by their genes, the APOE 2, 3, and 4, and which ones your loved one has. If they have two APOE2 genes, 10% of the population is in good shape. They have two APOE2 genes. Their curve is going to be a really long curve before they fall. But if they have two POE4 genes, the curve has got a really steep fall at about 2 years.
And I would where you are. You have the diagnosis or whether you're caring for someone with a diagnosis is to observe that. My husband's journey was over 10 years. My business partner's husband was about 10 years. We've had other loved ones where they were about 6 years. You don't know how long. It's want to make sure as you're staying in the present moment, moment by moment, and addressing where they are in that moment can be very stable and then just drop. And
Have anyone tell you about their loved one going through something like what they do at the Ovid clinics with oxygen therapy
oh, sure.
to attempt to bring back the activity
Yeah,
in their
we
brain?
might take the diagnosis away. And you can do different therapies. There are a lot of a healthier surrounding. They're not going to change the diagnosis.
Here in the villages, there's an Israeli firm called Avi. Their regimen is 3 months long where you're spending 5 days a week, 45 minutes or an hour in the hyperbaric chamber, as well as doing mental exercises and physical therapy to improve people. And I
Breathing
know I had
exercises
seen
are fabulous. Exercises are great for everyone. There's some things that we can.
that's independent. I have witnessed some people with mental decline change the fall in their curve and bring it back up. Other people, not so much. As soon as they stop the 3 months of hyperbaric chamber therapy, they fell back very rapidly into where they were before it started.
Some of the medications, my dad and my husband were given medications early in their diagnosis. Really dramatic. It's not currently a Medicaid approved that will help throughout the entire journey.
They are testing preventatives who will become a vaccine for preventing something like Alzheimer's, but that's still probably 2 to 3 years away. Alzheimer's disease is the most feared disease in America, even though it's not the one that kills the most people. What do you think the time frame should be when someone gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's that their family and caregivers should take action in terms of wills, passwords, even social media accounts?
Theoretically, the answer should have already been done. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you thing to do for that document signed while they still have the mentality to actually sign them. I really no need to, especially if it's someone you're supporting all of those pieces of information being shared. And then the other thing that you want to do when you've got someone in their diagnosis is talk with them. I mean, you maybe early on, but the sooner that you start talking about things that are their preferences that they may not have been able to have shared with you so far. For example, together is what are some of the options for incontinence underwear? What would make you physically more comfortable? Have them try them on before they need them so that they can share with you. And then to eat or that they don't like to eat. What are their preferences? The things so that when they can't communicate, you already know the answers to the things. When you bring someone into the home for a few hours, the kinds that are most easily recognizable by you. My husband was diagnosed. I created a photo wall. And if we would go to dinner with someone, a photo wall, and at eye level, and we would talk about them and we would use their names. And I created a business card that said, my husband, and I gave his name, name is Jack, my husband, I appreciate your consideration. I would give that to the server, or I would give it to the host to give to the server. I would have gone through the menu before we got to a restaurant to also look at the activity that they like so that you can recognize the things they have access to. And I talked with someone in a sport group, and because was a gentleman, they thought, well, he likes sports, and they would have the TV on. Well, they were putting him in with the TV that had sports on it. Well, he likes sport. Capturing these kinds of information, you're able to providing care, conversations to be having, foods they like and they don't like. Would they prefer to have things done? Are they left-handed or right-handed? How do they like to wear their clothes? What are the things that are most comfortable? And be doing those things in support with them. Also be observed the caregiver when you really feel the most depleted, where it would be beneficial for you to have someone and come in and share some time with your loved one. So you could get away for an hour and just rest, or you could closing your eyes, or it could be going out and going to the store, going for a walk. So observe yourself and you choose to do. And one of the things I didn't handle this, I can do all this, gym every morning, first thing. I don't need to go every single day. Husband, the numbers guy, he when he started not being able to do the numbers well, he said, well, I'll stay up and after he goes to sleep and he'll never know. Well, I could get away with sleep. Well, over time, that's not such a great idea. And we have the opportunity to start to be addicted to things, either whether we're the caregiver or it's with the care receiver. It's going to make that journey, and also the journey for other people we bring in for support, whether it's a non-professional like a family member or someone else, a friend, because of our loved one.
It seems like you need to have several different, I'm going to call them books.
As a
on your
queen of
loved one.
notebooks, digitally, or you can have them in person. I had some things that I
Right.
also with one, and that's been for a long time. You can Google it, File of Life. And I also registered them with the medical around, and he started to go for a walk because he liked to walk. And he's been walking for 20 minutes, and we don't know where he is. The first call I made is a police department and started looking
Mhm.
for him. They found him. And when I got, like 5 minutes later, and we're just having the nicest visit. And Jack wasn't concerned. The police officer was being really friendly. So I had such peace of mind when I did that early in his diagnosis because I didn't know if it would ever happen. It did. So there are things that you do, and
That's a great tip. What about the plethora of electronic monitoring devices, whether it's a GPS
Sure.
watch that you give your loved
Yep.
one to wear, or a sensor that monitors whether or not they've gotten up out of bed in the middle of the
There are
night.
loved one lives alone and they live independently. There are things that monitor medication. There are a variety of different things where you can have tracking devices that your loved one would have. They can put it could be in the heel of their shoe. At a tracking device, of course, I had we had the phone. There came a point in time when my husband couldn't use the phone anymore, but it could still be a tracking device. And so the amount of technology that is available to support, because they could take the medication and put it on the medication and think it's a bug and throw it out, which we heard the story from people in the support group, is that her mom would take the medication out of the machine, put it on the counter to get the water, and then she would think because the pills roll around, she thought it was bugs because she would throw them out. And one day and saw, what's all of this? Well, it's happening. And so it's the continuous observation. It's continuously adjusting. My husband the watch was not going to work because he would take it off. Some people are fine with that. So you want to know that the different diagnosis you want to get people, what are you going to be comfortable with? And the other thing is early in the diagnosis, talk to your loved one. Have them become aware of something. The easier it's going to be for them.
The transition for a loved one when you have to take them out
Mhm.
of their home and move to a facility, whether it's a lockdown memory care unit, an assisted living facility. How do you think caregivers should handle that?
I did that both with my dad and with my husband, and I felt like it was a gift. It is that my love care at the level they need, and they can also looked at it, how they would do everything. Talk about notebooks. I had one of those. I wanted to do it to make their job as easy as possible. I asked them, show them what was important to my husband. We would talk things.
In picking the
Yes.
facility, Because there may, in any physical area, there are usually
Sure.
more than one choice for memory
Uh-huh.
care units. What criteria did you
I
use?
use several criteria. Again, going back to my goals of safe and very social. I wanted to be able to have him in different activities there. He could get outside and walk. They had an area where he could walk, and they had a day program, and I put him in their day program. And when I picked him up at the end of the day, he was smiling. He didn't remember what he had done, but he was happy. Community and the ability to use his phone at that time. And he called and he said, "Get me out of here," and he was so unhappy. And so I navigated it. With my dad, he had a different set of requirements and different things that he enjoyed. And he enjoyed a peaceful, less activity going on. Found a smaller environment. It was so easy for me. It was look at it from the lens of what was important for them.
Okay. You mentioned your podcast. Why don't you tell our listeners if they have a caregiving issue or they want to become more caregiving aware, how to listen to your website called the caregiversjourney.org.
.org. And you can go there and you'll have a list of all the podcast episodes. You can also go to podcast episode we do have of it, and you can also listen to it from an audio file. Put links in the show notes for any products, and there are things we have ourselves, so they've got that. And then if anybody's book and Instagram, say, hey, we'll work on addressing that topic.
Sue Ryan's website is caregiversjourney.org. Great. Thanks for being with us
You're
today.
very
Sue.
welcome, Mike. Thanks for inviting me on.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, Dwayne Romick, Paul Sorgan, and Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. The way our show grows is with your help. Text your friends about this show. If you enjoyed listening, or just tell your friends about the show. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2025, all rights reserved.